Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to discuss my first impressions on the units in the Orc Codex. I just picked myself up a copy of their Codex last Saturday and figured there might be some people out there that are curious about my thoughts on the Codex and the Orc units. I have went through the book once already to take notes on what I think is good or can possibly be good, so I would like to share that with you today. Keep in mind though, this is not a faction focus or a guide for how orcs should be played. This is just my first thoughts on the units in the Codex without doing any testing whatsoever. It's just a little bit of math hammer and some theory crafting on my part for what units I think will end up being good. With that said, this video was sponsored by themagnebaron.com. They offer magnets of all sizes, magnetized movement trays, and magnetized flight stands, all for a great price. So if you were looking at picking up anything magnet related for the hobby, then check out themagnebaron.com. A link will be in the description. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the orc units that I think are standouts in the new Codex. So let's start from front to the back of the Codex, but also in a weird way. I'm going to first talk about all the models I think would be good in an infantry-based list, and then I'm going to talk about all the models that I think that are good that are vehicles. So with that said, let's get into it and let's talk about the infantry. I think the Warboss is a must-have in an infantry-based list. He is pretty beefy and can put out some good damage, but he's also a great support for your infantry. The best rule he has allows orc infantry units within 6 inches of him to charge even if they advance that turn. This is great for orcs since they don't have the best movement and are going to need to advance up the board to get into glorious melee combat as fast as possible. Either that or they're going to need transports, but personally I think the horde route that foot slogs across the table is a better option because of all the support that you can give them. For example, like this Warboss. The Warboss's breaking heads rule is also good for when your mobs of boys have been shot up a bunch and have lower numbers, meaning their mob rule won't be as good. So this is a backup option for when your mob rule will fail. So overall, I think the Warboss is pretty good and an auto-include for infantry lists. I think Big Mechs are decent as well for another support choice for infantry-based lists. Like the Warboss, they have a decent stat line. Not quite as good, but still decent. But the reason I would take this guy is for the custom force field. A custom force field gives all models within 9 inches of the Big Mech a 5+ invulnerable save. This can also be changed to 18 inches with a stratagem. You can use this to give your units or squads of boys a 5+ invul against shooting attacks. This is especially great on infantry since they only have a 6+ save to begin with. So not only is that 5+ invulnerable, meaning that AP doesn't affect it, but it's also better than their normal save, which means more of your horde will survive the run across the board so you can get more models into glorious melee combat. I also think Weird Boys are good. At least one Weird Boy should be an auto-include as well. Access to psychic abilities is great, and also gives some psychic denials, and some of the orc spells are actually really good, and they have some variety in ways that they can be used. So there's not really much else to say other than Weird Boys are great because they're really the only thing in the book that can bring psychic abilities. So I think they're great just for that alone. Painboys are pretty good too. They can give a 6+ feel no pain to all of your infantry. Combine this with a Big Mech, this is more defense for your boys to get across the field so you have more models to smack the enemy with. Sure, it's only a 6+ feel no pain, but that's still really good, especially when you have units of boys that have 30 models of them. This means that statistically you should save 5 models on average per squad of boys. This also means you only need this guy supporting 2 units of 30 boys to save more boys than what the Painboy is actually worth. So if you get one Painboy supporting 3 or 4 units of boys, then he becomes very efficient. So overall, I think this guy is great, but kind of like with the other support characters, you're going to have to maneuver your army in such a way so that you can be benefiting multiple units at the same time to make all of these support characters efficient. I think Nobs with Wagh banners are pretty decent as well. They have a 6-inch aura that gives +1 to hit for all orc units within that aura. This is great because your orc boys will be hitting on 2s instead of 3s. This is good because negative modifiers are a thing, but also because it just makes your unit a lot more efficient than they already are. Imagine 30 boys with 4 attacks each hitting on 2s. That's going to be brutal. On top of this as well, you have the keep and order rule that allows models who are fleeing due to morale to not flee on rolls of 6. So it's basically a feel no pain, but for morale checks, which is great. So combine this with all of the other support that you're giving to your boys, you can see why it's going to be hard to get these mobs of boys off of the table without a tremendous amount of anti-infantry. And speaking of boys, boys are still great as well. They are 1 point more expensive than they were before the Codex, but I think they are still great for their cost. They get a boatload of attacks, and when combined with all the support units I just mentioned, they can be pretty survivable. The mob rule is great and means they support other units of boys as well, giving them better leadership. Also, because of the green tide rule, you are incentivized to bring large units. So because of all of this, I think boys are amazing, especially when you use them in multiple large 30-man squads. Gretchin are okay as well. They are the brimstone horrors of orcs. They aren't meant for damage or pretty much anything other than just sitting on backfield objectives or denying deep strike area as your main force runs in to get into melee combat. Other than that though, this unit isn't very useful, but they still do have a place. I think Tankbustas are pretty good as well. These guys would be the main source of anti-tank. The rocket launches are pretty decent, and they have some good stratagems that allow these guys to put in some serious work, like the stratagem that allows them to shoot twice, or the stratagem that allows them to throw 10 grenades, or even both at the same time for some major destruction. Overall though, I think Tankbustas are pretty good as well. Personally, I'd throw them in a transport like a truck and have them shoot stuff, that way they still have some protection with some mobility. I think Stormboyz are pretty good as well. They are a little more expensive than boys, but they do have the fly keyword, meaning they can charge flyers that your boys can't. And they can also deep strike for free. Basically everything I said about boys applies to these guys as well, except these guys have a few more options because of the ability to deep strike and the fly keyword. I think Lootas have a place too. They aren't as good at anti-tank as Tankbustas, but they are better at killing heavy infantry like bikes or terminators. So if your meta has a bunch of 2-wound models like Primaris or Bikers, then Lootas are a great option for that. And also, like the Tankbustas, they can also shoot twice because of the stratagem. Now that I've gone over all the infantry, let's talk about some of the vehicles that I think are going to be pretty decent. The Deathkiller Wartrike is pretty good. He is the equivalent to a Warboss, except that his abilities affect bikers and vehicle units instead of infantry, meaning he supports bikers and vehicles. He has a great stat line as well, so overall I think he's a good choice if you want to make a speed freaks list or a vehicle heavy list. Warbikers are pretty good as well. They have a ton of DACA and a lot of shots, so if you wanted a more shooting centric orc force, then I think taking max units of bikes is a good way to go. They are also pretty decent in combat as well, but I think they are outshined by boys when it comes to close combat, since boys just have way more attacks. So the bikers are more for mobility and range support in my opinion, but I still think they have a place and they're still pretty decent. And then we have Trukks. I think Trukks are the go-to transport for stuff like Tankbustas. They are really cheap, meaning you can bring more boys or other units, and they do their job pretty well. I think the bigger transports aren't as good, although I was kind of on the fence with the battle wagon. For as of right now, I think Trukks are the go-to transport. My opinion can always change in the future though after some testing. Mek Gunz look alright as well, although I think the auto-hitting weapon might be a red herring. Personally, I think I'd rather go with the custom Mega Cannon, but I think the Tractor Cannon is decent as well, but also a double-edged sword, since if it kills a flyer, that flyer will automatically crash and burn. So if your opponent is aware of this, they can fly their flyers right into your own lines, and if you target and kill them, then you're gonna hurt yourself as well. So again, I feel like the custom Mega Cannon is better of the two options, but I could be proven wrong in the future. This video is more or less an estimation of what I think will end up proving to be good, and not necessarily what is good for sure. As for the Orc Flyers, I think the Burna Bomber and the Blitza Bombers are probably the best out of all of them. If you bring them and combine them with a Wazbomb Blastojet, then you can give all your flyers a 5+ invul if you fly them all together, which will make them more survivable. I would only do this if I was bringing a bunch of flyers though to be supported by the Wazbomb Blastojet. Personally though, I don't think I would actually take any flyers in my own list. I would just take a bunch of infantry like boys and Stormboyz and stuff, but I am trying to tell you guys what units I think are pretty decent, just in case you guys want to play a little more casually but still have some strong units in your army. And the last thing to talk about is the Morkanaut. I think the Morkanaut is the better of the two big guys, mainly because the utility it brings with the custom force field, which can help keep your army safe by giving them more durability through invul saves. To be honest though, I'd probably never take this thing in the game because I don't think it's too great, but out of all the bigger models, I think it has potential, so I mentioned it just in case some of you wanted to go out and buy that model. And that about covers all of the units that I think are standout in the Codex. Again, this is all based off of looking at the rules and theory crafting, while also using a bit of math hammer. I would still need actual testing though to see if my theories are correct, but since the book literally just came out, I haven't had time to do that yet. But hopefully this video gives you guys a good idea of where to start when trying to compete or build your orcs. Also, the last bit of information, because I have a feeling I'll get this question asked a lot in the comments, I think the best army trait to go with for the bulk of your force is Evil Sons. Their bonus to the movement and charging is great and can be used in so many ways. Mainly, it's just to make it easier to get into combat, which is where your boys and the most of your force wants to be. Also for the shooting units, like Tankbustas and Lootas, I think the best army trait to go with is Bad Moons because of the stratagem to shoot twice. Sure, Tankbustas already re-roll failed hits because of their ability when they shoot tanks, but the shoot twice stratagem is very good and I think it would benefit them a lot. Also, you can always make use of the re-roll ones when you shoot at stuff like monsters as well, so there's that. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content. And also, if you want to help support the channel further, you can do so on Patreon. A $5 pledge gets you access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord channel, where you can chat with me or other patrons and get basic coaching from myself. There is also an advanced coaching option for one-on-one coaching if that interests you as well. Or you can always just pledge on Patreon just to support the channel to allow me to continue making Warhammer 40k videos full time. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming!